Days had gone by, and the rotting, horrid smell penetrated a remote area of the suburbs of St. Petersburg, Russia. Someone had abandoned 7 black garbage bags, and the stench coming from them was repulsive even to animals. Hi, and welcome to this episode. This is the Cannibal Grandma, Tamara Samsonova. Neighbors became worried and understandably disgusted, and they were unwilling to venture in themselves and find the cause of the smell. So they called in the authorities. It was so bad and so disgusting. So firefighters were sent to deal with the complaint because it was a stench complaint, right? And so as they began rummaging through like these black garbage bags, they were shocked to find human remains wrapped in shower curtains in these black bags. Now, upon further investigation by authorities, it was determined that in these bags, there were partial remains of a neighbor that had gone missing recently. Now, nearby cameras were checked, and sure enough, and clear as day, they were able to identify the murderer. Brace yourself, because to their horror and disbelief, they came across a scene on the surveillance camera that was straight out of a Black Mirror episode. On camera was the image of Tamara Samsonova, an elderly, very petite woman who looked like a cute little grandma. And she was hauling the very familiar black bags containing the dismembered body parts out. Now, this elderly, seemingly inoffensive woman was getting rid of the pieces of who was a friend of and her very own roommate, actually. Like, she was disposing of just like regular trash, just super cold. Now, Tamara had coldly murdered and dismembered her friend and roommate after just a minor brawl between them. It was like a minor fight, minor argument. And this is what led to her murdering and then dismembering her roommate. The motive was so deranged and honestly so petty. She killed and she dismembered her roommate over some dirty dishes that her roommate had not cleaned, and she asked her to clean them. So this was the only reason that she gave for actually murdering and dismembering her. Now, she said the following: I did it all deliberately, she admitted, now being dubbed the Granny Ripper. Now, it is not the most shocking thing about her case, though. It is not. You're gonna need to park it over into a shoulder and sit around and listen to this. Now, according to her own uncoerced, willing testimony, she has murdered a total of 11 people. This petite, sweet, seemingly inoffensive grandma had eliminated 11 people. And in this list was her very own husband, her mother-in-law, and several tenant roommates that she had had over the years. So, Tamara Samsonova was born on February 5th of 1947 in the Russian city of Uzur. And please bear with me in my pronunciation. So my apologies if it's mispronounced. She graduated from high school and subsequently moved to Moscow to graduate from the State Institute of Linguistics. Once she finished her degree there, she moved to St. Petersburg, where she met her husband, Alexei. Now, the couple married in the early 70s and they settled in Dimitrov Street in the city's suburbs. And everyone remembered her as being a very loving, a very kind, and even a very friendly person with a good heart, although with a somewhat of a lean into the darker type of hobbies. So, Tamara was a fan of like horoscopes, which there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of us are into that kind of stuff, right? Myself included, astrology, literature, but she was also a fan of black magic, and it was a hobby of hers. But over the years, she actually became obsessed with one of the worst Soviet serial killers, Andrei Chikatilo. the butcher of Rostov. So, one of her neighbors by the name of Marina Kornivanko was a bit put off by Tamara's enormous interest in such a bloodthirsty character as Chikatilo. Tamara collected a lot of information about him, and she liked to comment on the way in which Chikatilo committed his murders. Like, she really appreciated the art of the serial murders that Chikatilo had committed. But the neighbor never even imagined that Tamara's love for this specific serial killer and serial killers in general would end up turning her into one of them herself. Now, her first criminal act occurred in 2000 with the strange disappearance of her husband, Alexei. The man's relatives were the ones to report him missing, not her, and insisted the police search for him. They were unsure that, what had happened to him, but they were sure that it must have been something terrible. Now, when investigating, they never met with any information from his wife that, paused their efforts. For example, she never had any information, or there was never anything around her that they felt was off enough to think that she had anything to do with it. So she was pretty good at playing her role there. Now, she claimed that he had run away with another woman, and she made it very clear that he was not coming back to her, that he had abandoned her for a whole new woman and a whole new life somewhere out there, right? She made sure that friends and neighbors were very much aware of her abandonment by her husband and this other supposed woman that he had. And in the end, authorities actually believed her version of the events, and they didn't dig or further investigate anything else, and the case was closed. Now, Tamara was left needing additional income, of course, now that she had, killed her husband, and she decided that she was going to rent a room in her house. Like everything else in Tamara's life, there were darker motives to why she wanted to start having company in her home. And earning a little extra money ended up becoming the perfect excuse for murdering her tenants. So one of them was Volodya, and this person was mutilated and dismembered in the bathroom, but his remains were never located. So Volodya was a roommate, or one of the first roommates that Tamara had. And the same thing happened with another man by the name of Sergei, whom she also dismembered and threw in the street. And although this time his body was actually found in 2003, the body had neither arms nor legs. And so I guess it was harder to identify or harder to figure out what had been, the cause of murder, or who had killed this person. So these two bodies were never linked at all back to Tamara. So in March of 2015, she temporarily moved in with her friend Valentina Nakolevna Ulanova, 79 years old. Tamara had begun renovations at her home and needed a place to stay until the workmen finished. So Valentina very kindly offered to take her in, and for several months, both elderly women shared an apartment. The remodeling work was completed in July, but Tamara refused to return home. And so something that made Valentina extremely uncomfortable was that Tamara was kind of taking over her home and making her feel like she was the guest in her own home. So the tension and continuous friction between these two was deteriorating the friendship. They argued over very little things very often now. And it was plain and clear that Tamara needed to get out of her home and go back to her own. But Valentina began to get really tired of Tamara's attitude. All of this friction actually came to a head on the night of July 23rd. Now, the last scuffle between them started over a pile of unwashed dishes. This, according to Tamara, is what triggered her to murder her friend. But it wasn't so simple, because Tamara had actually been planning this for a while now, and she bought sleeping pills to be able to incapacitate her victim, which was her friend. She crushed them and added them to an Olivier salad that she had prepared for her friend. Afterwards, she made sure that Valentina ate the plate and Tamara peacefully went to sleep. At around 2 in the morning, Tamara returned to the kitchen and found her friend lying on the floor, sedated from the pills that she had been given. Although the woman was still alive, Tamara began a bloody massacre. She took a saw and began to dismember Valentina's body. Once again, she was still alive when Tamara began doing this. So she first cut off her head and her hands, boiled them in a pot, and then she proceeded to mutilate the rest of Valentina's body. To conceal the crime she committed, Tamara disposed of the sliced parts in plastic bags. But first, she wrapped some of them in a shower curtain and placed them in different places near the apartment block, according to her, so that they wouldn't be able to identify her victim. So she wanted to spread it around the block around her apartments because in her mind, if they found maybe some parts, but not all the parts, they wouldn't be able to identify who the victim was, much less come back and get her for the crime. So for several hours, Tamara made trips to take out 7 black garbage bags to abandon them in the field near the house. She was going out all the way over there and back. This very petite grandma, just imagine carrying these big black bags, hauling them out and coming back, and then hauling another one and coming back, going unnoticed. I mean, well, I don't know, but it would have been strange. Now, additionally, she threw the pot away with Valentina's head and hands into a container. Unfortunately, that was actually never found. This entire horrendous criminal journey of disposing of the body was recorded by the security cameras of the building and the adjacent streets, right? So the security cameras around the area and the building were the ones that actually captured this grandma going in and out, and disposing of all of these things. Now, these images are still circulating on the internet. I'm going to place some of it here, what I'm able to place here, so that the video doesn't get taken down or anything like that. So we don't want to infringe on any guidelines or rules or anything like that. Now, but these images, you can see Tamara dressed in a blue raincoat and she's dragging the remains along the road. Now, a few days later, the nauseating smell of human waste had neighbors reaching out for help, and finally the firefighters coming in upon their alert to check it out. Now, after the macabre discovery, the police began an investigation to try to fully piece together what happened. One of their first tasks was to examine the security cameras in the area and hopefully discover who was the person responsible. Evidence of a mysterious woman dressed in blue carrying heavy garbage bags soon was discovered on the security cameras. Like I said, that was Tamara. They then traced the possible route that this unknown woman took, which led them directly to a trail of blood coming from Samsonova's building. Now, floor by floor, the investigators questioned the neighbors, and when it came time to knock on Tamara's door, she opened it, saw the police, and she actually shouted, "It was me!" With this confession, the authorities took Tamara to the police station, where, apart from confirming Valentina's murder, she also revealed 10 other additional murders. She said, "It's not my first murder. I've killed other people," very calmly. Now, meanwhile, the police searched for Valentina and Tamara's homes in search of evidence, and boy, did they find more than they bargained for. So they found that the bathtub still had the bloody saws and knives and all of the blood that she had drained out of the body that was still accumulated, there in the bathtub. Now, the refrigerator also had human remains stored in aluminum foil. There were also books on black magic and astrology, and just a multitude of information about serial killer Andre Chikatilo, which was her obsession, and several diaries written in Russian, English, and German. And in these diaries, the old woman recounted the murders she had carried out for years. She actually talked about how she had baked and eaten the lungs of one of the victims. She also drew disturbingly creepy diagrams of how she dismembered her victims. I killed my tenant, Valadia, cut him into pieces in the bathroom with a knife, put the pieces of his body in plastic bags, and threw them in different parts of the Frunzensky district, which was a small excerpt written in her diary. So, throughout the diary pages, the so-called cannibal granny chronicled not only just simply, but in detail the killings, and she includes like a summary of her daily routine. Things like, I took my medicine, I slept badly, I drank coffee, I barely eat. It was like she was writing all these things and then also carefully kept as a trophy among those diary pages a business card of one of the tenants that she had murdered. And that tenant was murdered in 2003 and the body was actually never found. But she claimed that she disposed of it a few meters from her home. At that time, investigators did not link the murder to Tamara Samsonova, but now with her own written confession, there was no doubt that she was the killer. Now, the news of the cannibal grandma's crimes shocked the public, and the media filled dozens of front pages with this very, very grim and startling story. In fact, some newspapers titled what happened as Nightmare on Dimitrova Street and even called it Baba Yaga, the name of a character in Slavic folklore who represents an old woman who tricked her victims into eating them. Now, the judge in charge of the case, Roman Shivatarov, sent Tamara to Kazan Psychiatric Hospital for a thorough psychiatric evaluation to elucidate her mental state. The following was written about Tamara. She represents a danger to herself and to those around her, explained the head of the St. Petersburg investigative community. According to the results of the forensic psychiatric examination, the woman suffers from a chronic mental illness in the form of paranoid schizophrenia. The statement said, therefore, the fate of Tamara Samsonova now remain in the hands of magistrate, the only one who could dictate mandatory medical measures on the accused. So the court hearing attracted great media attention. Several media outlets wanted to capture the moment in which Tamara Samsonova actually declared her crimes before the judge. And at one point, the old woman looked at the crowd and said, I knew you would come. It's a shame for me. The whole city will know. And then she blew a kiss in the air as a photographer immortalized that scene. Imagine this tiny, deranged, petite grandma who you just found out that all those horrible killings, ate body parts in the fridge, and she's just saying, I knew you would come. It's a shame for me. It's the whole city will know now. And she blew a kiss at them. How bizarre. But before taking the appropriate medical measures, Judge Shivatarov gave Tamara the floor. There is a suffocating atmosphere here. Can I go out? She blurted out. Then she added, I have been preparing my whole life for this hearing, Your Honor, for decades. I did it all very, very deliberately. Meaning her whole life, she had always like emulated this serial killer that she was so obsessed with. And so to some extent it appears that she actually wanted to have that notoriety for herself in that very specific way as a serial killer herself. And she added, I have been preparing for my arrest and court hearing for dozens of years. Everything was done deliberately. I have no other place to live. I am an older person. I have thought about this 77 times and then decided I should be in prison. I'll die there and the state will probably bury me. With this last murder, I closed a chapter. For her part, the magistrate responded, they have asked me to arrest her. What do you think? To which she replied, you decide, Your Honor. After all, I am guilty. I do deserve punishment. What a strange back and forth. But anyway, So when Judge Shevatorev announced that he would keep her under arrest and send her to a psychiatric hospital indefinitely, Tamara began to applaud with a smile on her lips. She was declared mentally incapacitated and has since remained in the Kazan Psychiatric Center under medical treatment and supervision to this very day. So, according to some experts, these measures prevent us from knowing the real extent of the murders perpetrated by the cannibal grandma and from finding the rest of her victims. So because of she was diagnosed with, it actually serves as a protection for her. So they haven't continued to question her. There are no other measures put in place to know the real extent of what she did, and that is not going to be disclosed to the public either, based on the fact of the findings that she is mentally and medically incompetent to continue to be be searched or investigated for these crimes. So tell me what you think about this murderous granny and the crimes that she committed. This case was so insane. It's so gory, but also it is so, in a world where you think you are at least safe from the petite, kind little grandmas, you're beginning to understand that maybe the whole trust no one thing is very accurate. If there are any particular cases you would like me to cover, or any particular things that you would like me to cover in the realm of the paranormal, the supernatural, the mythical creatures, please leave that in the comments. Subscribe, like, and share this video so that our little community may grow.